fans, wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down again with Mr. Keith Myers. Keith, welcome in, man.
Yeah, interesting show today. We're going to go over Seattle's quarterback competition because it is not a given as far as what is going to happen, and we don't even know all the players yet. There's possibly more people involved here than are currently on the roster. So we're going to kind of go through all of that.
You know, if there was any show where we could have just come in and kind of goofed off for like 10 minutes and told some jokes and talked about family and everything other than the quarterback position, this show probably would have been better. But as per norm, we just kind of jump straight into the topic. And the reason that we do that is just because we like talking football. We don't like sitting around just BSing. So in case anybody's wondering why we're not funny like some of the other shows that are all about fun and no substance, we're more on the other end. So, all right. So you set this thing up to where we don't even really know who all of the players are at this point. We do know who is currently on the roster, though. So we've got Geno Smith, we've got Drew Lock, and we've got Jacob Eason. And then there's a couple other periphery names out there that are kind of tied to two franchises in particular in the NFL that are unsettled right now as far as the quarterback job is concerned. Now, this is really interesting because out of all the positions and all of the storylines across the entire NFL, the Seattle Seahawks are unique in that this is one of the largest competitions and unsettled competitions league-wide, and which makes it kind of unsettled a little bit for me. I look at the rest of the roster, Keith. I look at the offensive position groups, and we might be a little weak on the offensive line, but maybe just this year, I think we're building something right there that's actually really pretty decent. I look at the defense; it's improving as far as pass rushing is concerned. I think the defensive tackles are stable. The linebacker group seems to be stable, but yet completely different without Bobby Wagner there, and KJ Wright's no longer around. The back end's interesting. They re-signed Diggs. We have some draft picks now. And that's probably the wishy-washy type position group on the team, other than quarterback, is kind of the defensive backs. But the talent there is there. We just need to kind of see where we're at after training camp. But that quarterback spot is just raw after Russell Wilson leaves.
Yeah, it's a mess, and we're going to get into just how much of a mess here, but it is an absolute mess, and there's just really no way around that.
I'm going to find a way. Look at me. I can't. I can't be negative, Keith. I'm trying to be real. I'm trying to be realistic, but at the same time, there's a certain portion of our listening base that is asking me to take on this role of the optimist and kind of paint this picture, even though people kind of want to be told the truth and the reality. They also want to look through rose-colored lenses when they look at their own team. And I'm just here. I'm here for them. I'm just letting you know that I'm trying to find ways in which we could win games with less than league average quarterbacks. And I don't know how we're going to do it. I'm just going to try.
Okay.
No apologies. All right. So Geno Smith, Keith, talk to me about Geno Smith. how you see him fitting, what Pete Carroll sees in Geno Smith, why he's a viable candidate to start week 1.
Well, okay. What Pete Carroll sees in him is a veteran player with starting experience from his time in New York who knows this team, knows the franchise, knows the offense. And so therefore you're not a complete unknown to the team. That's what he sees in him. And that's why he is someone who could start. He played in 3 games last year and had 5 touchdowns and 1 interception, completed 68% of his passes, and the offense looked absolutely dreadful despite those stats. Could not move the ball, could not score, 3 and out. And yeah, I mean,
Let's break that down a little bit. I know that that's frustrating for you, and you've mentioned this, a couple different times in a couple different shows, and I get it. It's frustrating, but is it attributable to Geno Smith, or were there other factors going on the offense that you could say contributed to this sort of 3 and out starts and stutters and fits and starts? Is there an upside there that could potentially carry over into meaningful wins, or any type of life as far as the offense is concerned, starting out the season, where it seemed like there was some other stuff going on there with Shane Waldron, a new system. Russell Wilson wasn't completely on his game. And it just seemed like we didn't have a run game early in the season and so forth. So I think that there's other factors there.
Okay. What if I were to tell you that statistically last year was the best year of his career?
Whose career?
Geno Smith.
Yeah, Geno Smith is a career, 61% completion, or is it lower than that? 58, maybe?
58.8.
58.8, right. And the touchdown to interception ratio is closer to even, I would imagine.
He has 2 more interceptions than touchdowns
and I would imagine his win percentage is below 500 by 5 games.
13 and 21.
So 14 games or 7 games. Okay. So yes. So
also you look at his air yards per attempt. Last year was 8.0. He's never been above 7.2 and only had 1 year where he was at that. Every other year has been in the 6s or 5s.
Here's an optimistic way of looking at those stats. That's great news, because in this offense with Shane Waldron, he had a career year in only 3 game sample size.
Yeah,
and he had a 5-to-1 ratio with 68%, which is in line with what Pete Carroll wants. You're not turning the ball over. You're completing close to 70% of your passes, and other factors contributed to those losses, not just his play. So there is a little room for optimism there in that stat line.
Yeah, and they could not move the ball. They had 165 yards of offense in one game, 129 yards of passing offense in another, and 160 in the third.
So, and how many yards rushing did we have in those games?
144, 90, and 69.
Okay, so that's not bad. And one of those, and 90, and the other isn't bad. The other, 69 is a little low. But I would think that the game that we had 140, 169, did we win that game?
No.
We lost that game.
We lost that
game. It's hard to lose a game when you rush for that amount.
It's hard to lose a game when you rush for 144 yards, but it's not impossible to lose a game when your quarterback only throws for 165.
What did the defense do?
Well, the defense gave up a lot of everything, a lot of passing yards.
So I'm just thinking it's a mixed bag a little bit.
226 and 119, so it wasn't as bad as I thought.
What was the time of possession in both those games?
Those games I don't have.
Okay, so just based on where we were last year, I would imagine it's somewhat lopsided. I'll give you that. Let's just say Geno Smith was abysmal, and he won one game and lost two, and he was ineffective in the game that he came in when Russell got hurt. So, what are we going to do? Like, is that the best that we have, or do you think that Drew Lock, 6'4", 228 pounds, 8-13 as a starter, career 59% completion percentage guy, threw 6.7 yards per attempt on his career with 25 touchdowns and 20 interceptions, is going to be any better than Geno Smith? And is Pete Carroll going to hand him the keys to the car if he has a better preseason?
If he has whoever has the best preseason will get the keys to the car. Will it matter? I mean, they're both bad. So, I mean, look at it.
What do we need to do to get to a point where we're like Jared Goff with the Los Angeles Rams and that offense a couple of years ago? Can we be that and get into and reach the playoffs with our remaining roster?
No. You have to, in order to do that, you've got to have a top 5 defense. Do you see a top 5 defense?
Not initially, not out of the gate. No, I do not.
No. And that's the thing, is you can get by with a Jared Goff, or, one of these guys. You can get to the playoffs if you've got a top 5 defense. So you're only asking your offense to score 17 points a game.
I would say now we have probably a 15 to 20 defense, and I might be underselling them slightly because they finished pretty strong last year, but that defensive backfield just kind of freaks me out a little bit until they come along a little bit better. Mm-hmm. Midway through the year, I might have a better answer for you, but not right out of the gate.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I just don't see this as something where you're looking at one of these guys and thinking, wow, that's a game manager who can come in and
unless they can sustain third downs. Like if they can convert third downs like nobody's business this year, that would be a completely different story. But I don't see. I
mean, what they would have to do is establish a running game that would be like they had during the Marshawn Lynch years, where they were consistently at 3rd and 2. And so that they could do anything. And if they can get to get the running game going to that point, then yeah, you can. I mean, that's the other half of this, is you need to be able to have that to go through and make an offense, make a whole team's winning record work when you don't have a quarterback.
And you've got a new to us center in Austin Blythe, who's undersized, not known as a run blocker, and you've got 2 offensive tackles likely to start, rookies who are best at pass blocking and don't have an iota of an idea of what they're going to do for run blocking in the NFL yet, because they've never done it. And that's what we're going to start the season with. Mm-hmm. Plus a quarterback, whichever one you choose, is going to be less than 500 as a career starter. Those are all uphill things, man. I'll give you that much. I mean, those are definitely uphill things. Talk to me. Do we need to spend any time on Jacob Eason, Keith?
I don't think so, because he's not winning the job. That doesn't mean he won't be playing at some point this year, because if the quarterbacks continue to just, turn the ball over, Pete Carroll's going to go find someone to play that won't. And that might be Jacob Eason, but, or it might be someone who's not currently on the roster, but they could definitely go through and just have both these guys fail and just be like, all right, we have to move on.
So, okay. So talk to me a little bit about the other scenarios. So Pete Carroll has clearly painted this situation all offseason since Drew Lock arrived as being a two-way competition between Drew Lock and Geno Smith. Geno would have the upper hand initially. Maybe things would equal out during training camp with Drew Lock. He said all the right things about Drew Lock, stood behind both their quarterbacks, haven't brought anybody in, didn't draft a quarterback. But there are conversations happening. Reliable sources are indicating that the Seahawks are looking at Baker Mayfield. There hasn't been any talk, to my knowledge, of Jimmy Garoppolo, but that makes sense given the fact that San Francisco and Seattle are in the same division.
Yeah, they're not going to give Seattle a quarterback.
Likely would not work out a deal there. So Jimmy Garoppolo, though, could be cut. $25.5 million cap hit. He would have roughly $24 million in cap savings if they cut him for the San Francisco 49ers. If they move on with Trey Lance in the fold as their starter moving forward. Doesn't make any sense to keep a $25 million backup quarterback on your roster in Jimmy Garoppolo. So let's talk about Baker Mayfield and Jimmy Garoppolo.
So Baker Mayfield is the one that's you're going to have talk about because he is available. But he's got a bad contract. The Seahawks are going to want to give up nothing for him and have Cleveland eat most of that contract, which they're not going to want to do. But we'll see.
The contract is $18.85 million.
Yeah, for a mediocre player. And so you look at with all the stuff for him, he's at career 61.6%. Right, so. And that with that, he's, you look at his air yards per attempt at 7. That's pretty low.
It's not good. Jimmy Garoppolo beats him in every way possible.
Average net yards per attempt at 6.1. That's relatively poor. A QBR rating that's never been above 65 for a season, and a guy who gets sacked a lot. So I'm looking at all of this, and you look at his TD to interception ratio, and he's had one good year in 2020 when he went 26-8 in that regard. But every other year in his career, he's been about even, having just slightly more touchdowns than interceptions. So there's a reason why Cleveland gave up everything to go get a guy who has legal problems and may not play. Because if he can play, he's such a massive upgrade over Baker Mayfield.
That's where I think
the risk.
Yeah. So Cleveland, I think, really screwed up here, and they gave Deshaun Watson a fully guaranteed $200+ million a year deal. Not a year, but the total. And Deshaun Watson might be disciplined this year. The league, I think, is recommending, or somebody is recommending in a credible way, for at least a year suspension. And then they've got Baker Mayfield, who they crapped all over in the offseason through this process. And Baker doesn't really want to play for them. He's just kind of a player for the Browns in name only. He's just in no man's land, literally. But the Browns would have to eat $18.85 million of that $18.85 million cap because it's fully guaranteed. Now that's the thing different about Jimmy Garoppolo. His $25 million cap hit is not guaranteed. Only $1.4 million of that is guaranteed. So Jimmy Garoppolo is more realistic to me to end up landing on the Seahawks roster if he's cut. I would imagine there's back channel conversations going right now with his agent in some capacity. They don't want to legal tamper or anything, but they'll probably let him know that they're interested if something should happen. It seems more likely to me that Jimmy Garoppolo would land. In fact, I would prefer Jimmy Garoppolo over Baker Mayfield in a neutral situation. Now, both to me are not ideal because you look at the Seahawks roster, you look at what they would possibly do with Geno Smith and Drew Lock as quarterback. You might be right. They may get to 5 wins, and that could be it. That would be good for Seattle moving forward. They go get their guy in the draft next year and start that quarterback clock all over again with a guy that's under contract for 5 years and a low salary. You go for Jimmy Garoppolo, he all of a sudden elevates your overall roster and your win total. I think you probably get to 8 or 9, 10 wins with this roster and Jimmy Garoppolo. But is it the long-term answer? Is that the ceiling with a player like that? Well, we know 49ers have gotten to the NFC Championship game and the Super Bowl and so forth, but
they also gave up 3 first-round picks for a project quarterback because they thought that highly of Jimmy Garoppolo.
Well, what do you think?
Jimmy Garoppolo
between Baker Mayfield and Jimmy Garoppolo?
Well, I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo is the better player. He's also 30, and
he'll be 31. He'll be 31 in October.
There's no upside. What he is what he is. And so it comes down to, do you want to win in 2022? If you do, you go get Jimmy Garoppolo. If you want to win in 2023 and whatever, you go with Baker Mayfield if you have to pick one of the two, or really you go with Geno Smith because he's going to lose you more games and you're going to be in position to go.
Or do you find out what you have in Drew Lock?
Yeah, I mean, you gotta.
One of those, yeah.
So there is.
What do you think the Seahawks should do, Keith? What do you think they should do, and what do you think is likely that they do?
What I think they should do is put Drew Lock in there and see what happens. And, give him 6 games at the beginning of the year to show that he can play, which he won't do. And they'll be, 2-4 at the best. And at that point, the season will be over and they can, roll out Geno Smith or Jacob Eason or whoever and on their way to a 4-win season and get a very high draft pick that they can go draft one of the 3 elite quarterbacks that are in next year's draft. That's what I think they should do. That's not what they're going to do, but it's what I think they should do.
Let's pause on that just for a second. I just want to ask you a couple of questions. So if you do that, you do run the risk of losing your roster, of losing your players, of losing your locker room, of losing your head coach, because losing in the NFL is really hard on a team. A little hard on a coach, hard on a team, hard on the players. Whereas if you don't make a move for like Jimmy Garoppolo, are you really doing everything you can to put a winning team on the field? Straight up. Like if Jimmy Garoppolo has his cap number completely go away, you can sign him for anything. What they can should do is you be trying to do everything you can to win? Does your team expect you? Does Jody Allen expect you to make that move to show that you're doing everything you can do?
No. Jody Allen was on board with the plan, which was to, got the defensive coaching staff trade Russell Wilson and replace him with whatever.
Leftovers in the refrigerator.
Yeah. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. To make the case in the locker room, what they would need to do is to make a play at Jimmy Garoppolo, but lose the battle and let him go to Carolina. Because they weren't interested in paying what it took to acquire him. But they made a play, right? They said that they were interested. They were looking to upgrade. And then it's all about messaging inside the locker room. This is a team that has such a winning tradition under Pete Carroll that they get to a point where they're like, hey, we are this year we're developing players. We are, making decisions on the guys on our roster so we can move forward. You can go through a losing season and not lose a roster. I mean, just look at what happened in Detroit this last year where they were bad. And at the end of the season, the players were as much behind their coach then as they were at the beginning. So I mean, yeah, it really comes down to like, you have to know what you're doing.
It's true. No, you're absolutely right. I'm just saying it's a risk. It's a risk you take when you go down that path, when you know that you're going with a quarterback that's going to lose games, especially if the preseason is funky and he has more interceptions than touchdowns, or no touchdowns and 4 interceptions, some weird thing like that. And then they choose him, like Drew Lock, to be the quarterback. It's like, oh yeah. But in a neutral competition, you've got Geno Smith and Drew Lock. I'm going to leave the other Baker Mayfield, Jimmy Garoppolo out of it. 2 quarterbacks. You know what Geno Smith has got. You know that he can win 1 out of 3 games for you at our minimum, possibly more. You've got a roster that you want to signal to your team that you want to win. You're going to choose the best quarterback. I think everyone kind of likes Geno Smith. However, I think they go with Drew Lock. Mm-hmm. All things being equal, because they want to find out what the kid's got. 6'4", 228 pounds. He's a kind of a gunslinger guy. He went through a couple, 2 or 3, two offensive coordinators. This offensive coordinator situation in Seattle looks to be really stable and gives him, I think, a really decent opportunity to put him in the best position since he's been a pro to be successful. And I think that's why they choose Drew Lock, because you can always go to Geno Smith if stuff goes off the rails. But I think Geno Smith limps this team along to the point where it's just Geno Smith. And Drew Lock just kind of sits and they never find out. And then he's let go in the offseason, and who knows? Geno, at least you get a chance to see Drew Lock. And I think he comes out ahead, actually. And I think that he comes out ahead on the merit in the end. I think Drew Lock ends up being the better quarterback on paper and on eyesight. And you can kind of see the potential after preseason. And I think he wins it based on just that.
Yeah, I'll give you that. I think that overall, he'll
lose more games.
Probably
than Geno Smith,
because he'll turn the ball over. But yeah, I mean, we saw Geno Smith last year, and he had one good game against a terrible Jacksonville team before.
Everyone forgets that was a very, very bad team.
Well, and it was before the coaching transition that went on there. So they were still a very bad team coached by a very bad coach who had completely lost everybody in the locker room.
Urban Meyer was awful.
Yeah. And so that game, I think, is skewing what people are expecting from Geno Smith. When you look at the Pittsburgh game and the New Orleans game, that is more Geno Smith. These are not 2 teams that are. I think Pittsburgh made the playoffs, but only because the AFC did not have a 7th good team, but they weren't a good team last year, and New Orleans didn't. And he could not move the ball. He could not get a first down. Could not get the team in position to score points. And we both
talked about at the time, we thought that if Russell Wilson played, we win those games.
Oh yeah, we win those games easily. He was also put in a situation where you need one drive to go win the game, and he failed miserably in both attempts. So it's I think Drew Lock at least has the potential to be better than that. He also is going to lose you more games because he'll turn the ball over. So it all comes down to, what are you looking at? So yeah, I was just I'm sitting here while we're talking, looking at Jimmy Garoppolo stats, because you're like, ooh, yards per attempt, 8.4. And I'm like, that seems really high. If you've watched him play, and I go, oh, here's why. Yards after catch per attempt, 6.4. So there you go.
So he's throwing a lot of dink and dunk stuff. We know that.
He's throwing a lot to Deebo Samuel. who is an elite playmaker with the ball in his
Wouldn't
hands.
you? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just saying, like, that is, I was surprised at that number when you threw that out there.
Well, that's why you can complete 68% of your passes. That's for sure. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
you're
there's
not
no
being
easy
asked to do
answer.
anything
This
with
is
the ball.
yeah, this is a situation. I think you're right. I think that we're between 5 and 7 wins, no matter which way you cut it. I don't think that's 4. I think that we're a better roster than that. But 5 to 7 is probably it. Top 10 pick next year. We've got 2 first-round picks and 2 seconds, a future first. If we needed to, we could move all over that first round, up, back, whatever, in order to get the guy that we wanted. If it was a quarterback that we needed next year. Now, I'm not going to say that we're going to play for that. And I would say, please don't. If you're a fan, don't play for draft picks. But
this team needs to go try and win.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't think they will win, but that doesn't mean you don't try to win. Don't do don't go do what the Portland Trailblazers did last year and try to lose games in the second half.
Set your players down and not play anybody with a hangnail, et cetera. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't do that. Go do your best to win games and see what happens. But doing your best to win games is going to involve a lot of losing. It's going to look like, I keep bringing up Detroit, but it's a situation where it's a team that's completely rebuilding.
Our roster is better than Detroit was last year, Keith. Top to bottom, depth wise, and so forth.
It is.
Yeah, we are missing. But the
quarterback's worse.
It is.
And so,
but I think this system with and Pete Carroll, the way that he wants to take care of the ball and run the ball, and we've got some decent running backs. I'm saying that there is a chance that these guys could be better than advertised in the end, and have like 66 to 68% completion percentage and low turnovers. We could eke out some games that I think people might be expecting us to lose. I just think that we could end up getting to 7 wins.
Yeah.
And being a halfway decent roster, and you get to 7 wins and you can start to see some real positive things going on in other position groups, and some players are doing some really good things and so forth. And so even at 7 wins, I think we're in a position in the draft to be able to get up to the top 3 or 4 pick, I think, or top 5 pick in the draft, and make whatever moves that we need to do.
There.
That's true.
It depends on who's up there, because if top 3 picks decide they all need a quarterback, you're not getting a quarterback next year. And if you've got one team that thinks they've got their quarterback and is sitting there, you've got Jacksonville again, and say that they're picking second in the draft and they still think Trevor Lawrence is their future. Well, then you've got to give up everything to get up in that one spot, because that's the only chance you're going to get. And then look at San Francisco a couple of years ago. They had to give up 3 first round picks to move up not very far to get Trey Lance.
Yeah, 10 or 11 to 3, something like that was their move. Yeah, I know. Anyway, good luck, Seahawks, because this is going to be a heck of a competition. Like, it's one of the most. I know that we're kind of talking bad about these guys and back and forth, and it's kind of negative, and it is what it is. But it's not dissuading me at all from looking forward to what this competition is, just because it's fun. It's football, to watch guys compete day in, day out, back and forth. Who's going to, win this thing is still an intriguing battle to me. And find out, what's going on with Baker Mayfield and Jimmy Garoppolo. Those stories are not going away. So all that intrigue is going to be fascinating. We're going to have to wait a little while. There's another 5 weeks or so before training camp. So fun conversations to be had into the future, Keith. Thanks. By the way, if you're listening to the show, if you are want to leave a message on YouTube, we check those messages frequently. If you have questions, we're doing a question and answer show, recording on Thursday, and submit your questions. That'd be great. Anything goes. And
doesn't even have to be about football.
Doesn't even have to be about football. What else, Keith? What else is going on? That's it, right?
That's it. We are almost into July. We're at the end of June, and once we get into July, we're in the home stretch towards getting to training camp and having football to watch again. So
I think rookies can show up on July 26th.
Yep. Hang out there. Hang in there, people. You're almost there. You got 1 month left till football returns.
Find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. You can find me at NW Seahawk. Find the show at Hawks Playbook on Twitter. SeahawksPlaybook.com is the website. Find us on your favorite podcast platform and YouTube. Hit that subscribe button and share. Thanks. Take care. Let's go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. And the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.